Welcome back, listeners, to the Untethering Shame podcast, where we dive deep into the ways shame shapes our lives and how we can free ourselves from its grip. I'm your host, Kyira Wackett, and today's episode is one that will speak to so many of us because it touches on something most of us navigate daily: money. Joining me today is Kyley Caldwell, a coach, mystic, healer, and seeker devoted to emotional liberation, both for herself and those she serves. Kyley's work centers on unhooking from shame and the traumas, beliefs, and patterns that keep us from a sovereign love of self and others. One area where she sees shame manifesting profoundly is in our relationship with money. For many, money is more than a tool. It becomes a symbol of worth, safety, and even self-love. Kyley has experienced this firsthand in her own journey, recognizing that her deepest wounds were intertwined with her money story. In the process of healing, she found that mainstream advice, whether it was toxic positivity around manifestation or overly technical financial strategies, lacked the emotional depth to address the root issues. Today, Kyley is going to guide us through the emotional liberation that can come from unraveling our shame around money, examining the ways we project and process our unhealed wounds through it, and explore how the chase for financial success often becomes a chase for self-worth. So get comfortable and join me as we dive in and explore the stories, fears, and possibilities in transforming our money story. Kyley, welcome to the podcast.
I am so delighted to be here.
Oh,
And I got a little emotional listening to you speak to give me this intro
Say your truth.
because I've been so obsessive about this shame money link for so long, and there just feels something really humbling to hear someone reflect back like, yeah, you get it, we get it, it could be different. So thank you. I am so happy to be here.
Well, I'm equally excited, and I feel like sometimes that's really nice when we spend all this time in our head and we're like, do I even make sense? Am I where I'm supposed to be? And all of the shame stories that come in about if we're doing enough, if we're doing the right things, if we're spending our time appropriately, whatever. And then when someone can just reflect back to you the thing that you've just been hoping comes out on the other side, it's
Yes.
like, to me, it just feels like I can take a breath for a moment where it shouldn't be that I need someone else to validate me. I don't even want to say should. I don't want to shame myself for it. The goal is to not need someone to reflect it. But sometimes when we're still trying to find our footing, when someone else can just hold up that mirror for a second, it brings a sense of peace. And so everything I said, I got from a 20-minute conversation with you.
Yeah.
So I think also for you to maybe pause and be like, oh yeah, I'm actually really good at communicating what my interests and my goals are, and it is being seen and reflected. And that's a testament to the work that I've put in to get to this point.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I see you having something happening
I
right
know.
now.
There's like 5 things in my head at once. Well, I just wanted to respond. I want to like dive right into the money stuff, but I just wanted to respond to the part of you who was like, we don't want to need validation. And you're so right. And that's actually so much of what we're going to talk about with money is how it's one of the things that has a lot of very particular ways that we're hooked into it. But we don't want to need validation as in I can't sustain the lack of this validation.
Yes.
And also we are creatures of belonging. And I think we belong to each other.
Yeah.
And there's nothing sweeter than someone being able to look you in the eye and say, I see you.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing. I feel like sometimes, even from like a parenting perspective, there's all this information out on social media of how to parent the quote unquote right way. And I think everybody's just looking for the secret. And one of the things that has become sort of popularized, and it's talked about in the therapeutic world as well, is things like parents, caregivers, adults not saying, I'm proud of you, because then you're making it about you versus them. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I ask my daughter all the time, are you proud of yourself? How do you feel about doing this? There's also something really fucking nice about somebody else being like, wow, I see that. And I have this pride and this excitement. And so I feel like what you just said is so true, where sometimes I feel like we overcorrect and then we dismiss the fact that really most truths are a both and, not an either or.
Oh, we are on exactly the same wavelength, which I think we clocked the first 30 seconds we
Yes.
connected, because I had this exact same thought just last week. Because I also tell my kids often that I'm proud of them, and I
Mhm.
did the whole, like, parenting thing, and I thought, but I tell them that I love them all the time. I don't
Yeah.
withhold saying I love you because I want them to love themselves. And I think you're right. It's this yes and, right? I just as much try to say to them, do you feel really proud of yourself? How did that feel when you accomplished that? And
Yes.
also, I'm really proud of you. Even if you're not, even if you're having a day where you are not proud of yourself at
Yes.
all, I can hold that.
Yes.
And so I think you're right. Yes and.
Yes. Okay, because I feel like you and I, you're right. There was this like vibe moment within probably not even 30 seconds, probably like 4 seconds in that we just sort of felt. And so I feel like I just want to dive headfirst
Yeah.
into the brunt of what we're talking about. And I want to start by just being like, why the fuck is money so hard? Like, why is this such a problem that we cannot figure out? And where are we getting it wrong?
Mm. Well, and I think in some ways that's actually the most important question to ask, right? Why is this so hard? Is a is a really different kind of question than like, what do I need to do to fix it? Which we will talk about
Mm-hmm.
ways to make it less painful for sure. But
Mm-hmm.
the reason I like the why question in this moment is because it's inviting us to like look at the system and structure itself. That like maybe some of the ways that it's hard is not because you can I swear on your show?
Oh, I just did. So
Okay.
you drop whatever you want. Yeah.
Great, great, great. Maybe the ways in which it's hard is not because you are a fuck up, right? Maybe it's
Yes.
because this system and the structure between trauma and capitalism and toxicity, like they are living inside you and around you. And maybe that makes it a little hard to breathe.
Mhm. I know the question that just came up after you said that is I feel like so often it's where are we anchoring our story and to whom are we ascribing responsibility? And for so many of us in shame, we have made ourselves the one responsible for everything. We are
Yes.
the person that has to fix it all, which gives us this weird false sense of control. So then, if I could
Hmm.
just read this book about financial freedom and I do these things, I'm going to feel better. But also, it's really dismissive of the fact that a lot of the systems and the structures and the intergenerational trauma and wounds and larger scale movement in our world is what makes this conversation so tricky. And the fact that it isn't money in a bubble, it's money as it relates to what you said in the beginning, that aspect of belonging and how
Yeah.
money is a tool that we use to try to find belonging, but we don't often think about it that way. And I think that miss is part of the problem.
And I think one of the things that I really want to offer to people is to start to give yourself real permission that money is emotionally complicated. We
Mhm.
recognize that our relationship with our mothers is emotionally complicated. That parenting is there are material things like I got to get my kids food before they have a hangry meltdown.
Yeah.
And also it is emotional, right? And so we
Mhm.
look at our whole life like exercise, gardening, like picking what house to buy or place to town to live in, all of that we recognize as emotional. And then we turn to money and all of a sudden we tell ourselves that it should just be a series of numbers and I should just budget and I should just work hard. There's a lot of I should just, and that we
Mhm.
somehow don't give ourselves permission for it to be an emotionally complicated thing, which is bonkers, A, because everything is emotional, but two, money touches every facet of our lives. How could it not be emotionally complicated?
Mm.
I think one of the biggest reasons why money is so hard is because, like, you're trying to use a hammer for something
Mm.
that needs a screwdriver. Like we're just not even actually acknowledging what the real quote unquote problem is because we're putting it in this tight little, it's just about budgeting and asking for the right kind of raise and skipping your latte. And it's
Mhm.
not. If it was just quote unquote about that, well, then the budget would have worked by now, my friend.
Yeah. Well, and it's recognizing that most of us, there's definitely categories when it comes to money and how much money we have or had growing up. When we think about poverty, access to basic human rights, in my mind, things like having a place to live where you feel safe, running water, electricity. There's that side conversation, which is an important conversation. It's not less than. It's just different than what I think we're talking about here, which is really this idea that our stories around money is that there's a certain amount of money or a certain relationship with money that's going to allow me to be X, successful, happy, healthy, whatever it is. And so we constantly are moving, chasing that next mark, assuming that that's going to happen. And it never happens, no matter how much money you have. I mean, there's research to show that. In fact, more money often makes people less happy and grounded and fulfilled. But we fear that discussion. And the question that's coming up in my head as you were saying this is this idea of when everyone's going, if I could just, if I just, if I just, what would happen if you did? Okay. So let's say you had enough money, then what? And I think that right there is you can't answer that question without a feeling. And that's where I feel like we don't go there. Like the feeling for me growing up, having money be a scarcity, having a mom that struggled with substance use, was in and out of jail and prison, and she wiped our savings for drugs. She wiped my savings at different points. For me, having money was security, having a sense that I would be safe. So if I had enough money that I knew I could count on things, I would feel safe. And yet, that wasn't the thing I worked on in therapy. I read financial books on how to budget instead of recognizing that money wasn't going to be the thing that gave me safety. It could help, but money was not the root issue that I needed to address. And that made it really complicated for many years.
And I think going back to the top of the show where we thought it was a sidebar about parenting, but we kind of set the precedent for the whole show, right? Is it's really yes and. And I think this is another reason why money is really complicated. So one is that it's actually very emotional and we don't let it be, and therefore we don't process the emotions of it. And one of the first places where I started to see this was some really incredible, I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with some really incredible therapists, and I would bring to them some money stuff. And I could see how, like, childhood trauma, we could go really down deep, and the money conversations, I could feel a surface layer. I could feel we were only at the surface, right? And that even and I mean, these people, each one was like brilliant at what changed my life, but it wasn't an area that they had access to from the kind of emotional depth that I also was trying to swim through. So that's one piece. But then the other piece is that we do need it for safety, right? It is like we live in a world where every single thing, food, shelter, water, clothes, so all of your basic necessities, unless you somehow have managed to live off the grid, they ask and engage with around money. And so it's not a system we get to opt out of. Right? It's not, you can't like go on retreat from money and heal, right? Or like some people go no contact with their parents and then they can come back and maybe bridge something different, right? You can't go no contact with money. And you do need it for basic material safety. And it's also about all these other things that are not about food and shelter and water. And that is really complicated. To heal it is to build the bridges you're walking across it, because you're actively engaged with the soup of it all at the same time. I will do my best to break it down a little bit and give us some more tangible entry points. But I think this is an important starting place, because in addition to money being really hard, there is so much shame about it being hard.
Yes.
So it is almost universally hard. Sometimes at parties, people will be like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm a money coach, but like we talk about how your relationship with your mom and is why money's hard. And everyone's always like, oh, ha, I need you. And I'm like, I know, I need me. Like we all do, right? So almost everyone has complicated relationships with money, and yet we pretend that we don't or that we shouldn't. And so it's hard for all the reasons we've laid out. And then there's this shame that it shouldn't be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like this notion, I mean, it's literally the conversation about shame in general, where it's like shame is this ubiquitous experience, and yet everybody's trying to hide the fact that they have shame. And I'm like, no, literally, I can tell you just by looking at you that you have shame because you're a human being.
Right,
So like, I don't need to know any other information other than you're not a robot, thereby you have shame. And so I feel like the same thing with money, and yet we hide it. And it's shame about how well we manage it, how much money we have, how much money we're making, our goals towards making money. Like that's a big thing I've had to grapple with is, so growing up, my mom very much was addicted to working. And I don't know if it was chasing security. She has what would be diagnosed, if it were a diagnosis, as very complex PTSD. And I can see a lot of that now. All I knew as a kid is she worked a lot. She was constantly working on holidays because it was time and a half as a nurse, like all of these things. So like she prioritized money over time with me in those instances. And I think a lot of that was her own trauma wounds. And so then growing up, I had her and everything that I experienced where I'm like, I need to feel secure. I'm not going to do that. Then I moved with different family members, but I lived with my grandma for the majority of my like early preteen into my 20s, in and out of when I'd come home from college. She became second mom. She's a depression survivor. She would like give me shit because I would buy the 5 for 25 deal at Victoria's Secret. And she's like, underwear shouldn't cost $5 a piece. That's absolutely ridiculous. You know, cans in the cupboard that expired 8 years ago because canned food shouldn't go bad. And we need this. And, you know, all the little ketchup packets. And so I'd have all these ideas. And it was also two single women raising me that even though it wasn't always a direct conversation, it was, I need to be prepared to be alone, and I need to be okay to support myself. I can't rely on anybody else to support me, whether that is my mom who dumped our money or a partner, whatever that is. And like all of these things came into be. And then as I got into adulthood, it was not just, okay, well, I have to be really good at managing money. It's also, I have to be ambitious enough to want to make enough money that now I am seen as successful, that I want to climb a ladder because the amount of money I make, whether that's the title of my job or my ranking in my job, is then definitive of my worth and value, because I don't want anyone to look at me and to think that I am not secure, successful, ambitious, whatever those things are. And all of that, if we're, you know, thinking about it from your perspective, gets looped back to the emotional experiences growing up. It has nothing to do with what my mom's bank account was and what she taught me about how money pays bills and how I budget.
1,000%. Everything you're speaking to. And I want to give us some framework, because we're talking in the beginning about how like money is everything and it's soupy and it's complicated. And so I kind of want to like make a little map for us. And I want to point to specifically how we use money, and money signifies, to your point, that money signifies all sorts of things that are not actually specifically about money. We connect money to 4 core things. Safety. Whew, I have enough money to pay my bills this month, right? Desire. I want to feel powerful. I want to go on vacation. I want an extra pair of pants. I want to feel safe, right?
Yeah.
So safety, desire, belonging. I'm going to give you a gift because I love you. I'm going to shower. You know, we just had my son turned 8 years old the other day, right? Like, oh my gosh, yes, we'll buy you some goofy balloon because it makes you light up with smiles. How great that I get to go spend $20 at the It's a Party and it will make you smile. And it's about freedom. I have choice. I can choose to quit my job if I have a big savings account. I can choose to rest for a day if I have enough money saved up. So safety, desire, belonging, freedom, which to a point you made in the beginning, I think we could suggest are actually like core human needs. And yet money shows up as the literal barometer of how much of these things we're allowed access to. And so that's messed up. And one of the other reasons why unhooking the money shame can be complicated is because depending on the chapter of your life that you're in and the point of your healing journey, you might be in a different bucket at any given time, right? I spent a long time in the money, safety, shame bucket. And then all of a sudden, and none of this is actually linear, we know that, and then all of a sudden I was living in the money and desire shame bucket, which was like, my desire is dangerous. Who am I to want these things? I'm going to hurt people if I'm not reined in. And so sometimes we might be working through the same external issue of not being able to stick to a budget, or having plenty of money but still feeling really scared, or overspending, or whatever the case may be. But the underlying theme that we're working through might actually be really different. So you and
Mm.
I both might be feeling like we have a tendency to impulse overspend, but
Mhm.
I might be doing it because I'm chafing about freedom and I'm trying to heal a freedom wound. And you might be doing it because your core safety stuff is activated. And so some of the medicine and compassion and reframing that we need is a little bit different, even though the surface layer looks the same, which is again why some of the finance literacy budgeting books don't work, because they don't even ask that question.
Mm. Okay, so it's making me think about 2 things. One, I love that you laid out those 4 buckets because I think it gives people a sense of kind of, okay, where might I be? And then the fact that you put that sort of third entity out there, which is shame, because we can be in one of these buckets in really healthy, adaptive ways for us. It's not like this is the
Mhm.
universal way to do it. But then there can be ways that we're in them, and then shame is in the mix, and it's really having an effect. I guess I'm curious when listeners are thinking about this and they're going, where the fuck do I fall right now? How do I even begin to figure this out? Are there
Mm.
ways that we start asking ourselves questions? Is there something that we start doing? Because I think for many people, because we're so linear, they're like, well, I'm just going to start at the beginning and start talking about money and what I learned about money, and then we'll piece it all together and it'll make sense. But what you're describing to me feels more like a curiosity around where we're at right now and starting
Yeah.
to explore that relationship and then using our past, using our different relationships, using that to add context. But really, once we get clear on really where the pain is right now.
Yes. Yes, and perhaps seeing things more cyclically or organically than linear.
Hmm.
Another piece that I want to point out, and this is hard, especially around the shame, is that I would posit there's not a doing money right. And I can feel my own body having a
Hmm.
reaction to that, for the record, everybody. Like, I teach this and I am living it all of the time, okay? One of the ways capitalism works, one of the like cruelties of our perfectionist protector is that there's a place that you arrive where this is no longer painful and you figured it
Yep.
all out, and therefore you're perfectly safe, right? But the safety actually lives in the fact that money is complicated. Capitalism is complicated. You are complex. And I have found so much of the safety that has allowed me to breathe where shame was living is just allowing that to be true and not actually
Mm.
mean I am bad, I am deserving, I'm going to be cast out of love. It's only a matter of time. And until people figure out all of these nasty stories that shame tells us that crop up in money a lot, I would just invite you to allow the possibility that it's okay if money's always I was talking to a client and dear friend of mine the other day over coffee who's very financially intelligent, very successful, and we were talking about how like scarcity's back again and I feel a certain kind of
Mhm.
way about it. And we were talking about how sometimes in life there are just certain curriculums that you get where it's like this is the space of growth and learning. It doesn't have to stay painful. And this is where I think loving and releasing our shame helps, because the more we can allow, oh, there's just always learning here, the more when money shows up in a complicated way, it's like, oh, this is interesting, instead of, oh my God, I need the bottom of the floor to open up and swallow me whole because I will not survive the fact that I forgot to pay my credit card bill.
Yeah, and I mean, it really is the driving point back to money is emotional. Some of the resistance for people and even just that phrasing is gonna be, but there's a logic, there's a skill. I don't know how to budget.
Hmm.
We're not saying that. We're saying there's an emotional component, and I think the
Yes.
reason that that's important is then exactly what you just said, which is that many of us, I mean, whether it's your weight, your relationship with your body, your success in some capacity, the needle moves all the time. And there are
Hmm.
times you never get to a point. I mean, I say this mostly as someone that struggled with an eating disorder. That was my specialty for a very long time, was eating disorders, body dysmorphia. And a lot of the conversations were, you're never going to love your body all the time. Like this sort of self-love
Mm.
idea and this like body love idea is great in theory, but there's some contextual pieces that we're missing. Like that also means that you're going to wake up some days and be like, I feel fat and disgusting and I don't want to leave the house and I've changed my outfit 30 times. That doesn't mean that you are now broken and there's some sort of pathology that we need to address. That's the human experience. And sometimes we have a shitty relationship with our body, and that can be okay. There are times we need to
Yes.
address it, but sometimes it just exists. And I feel like what you just described with that sort of cyclical idea is that money is also a contextual relationship
Yes.
where some days I'm going to feel really good about it. Some days
Mhm.
I'm not. And that requires a relinquishment of control. And I think that really scares people because they
Mhm.
would rather feel like they are trying to gain control to master money
Yeah.
than realize that the ultimate goal is to get to a place where they recognize they really aren't in control of the bigger picture and that money
Mhm.
is a component of responding to and being in transition with that bigger picture.
And I think one of the single most powerful things that we can do when we're feeling activated about money is to really invite in compassion. Because if you are feeling activated
Mhm.
about money, it's probably shame. It's in there, even if it's not the top, even if it's buried under some other things. Like, for example, a lot of money anxiety is that the anxiety is protecting from the money shame, right? So if you are feeling
Mm.
activated around money, the most powerful thing you can do is invite in some compassion. Like and I think that's why I'm spending so much time on this idea that it's okay if money is hard. It's really okay. It doesn't have to stay that way. It doesn't actually have to be painful. And also, it is okay if it is. And it doesn't make
Mhm.
you bad and wrong and unworthy of love and receiving. And I think the more deeply we can just return to that over and over again, it just gives us breathing room so that we can access more logic around our budgeting,
Right.
right? Because we have more compassion. We don't need to be as reactive about our money choices, right? We can make more.
Mhm.
If you're self employed, you can make more powerful assertions of worth and value in your pricing because you're not in that cycle of shame and unworthiness. So the compassion is
Mhm.
not a like letting yourself off the hook or coddling. It's like, no, it's the yes and let's bring in compassion so that the actions and choices that we make are charged with our heart and our mind, and they are
Mhm.
therefore more powerful and more in alignment. But the other thing that I really want to speak to around the emotions part of money is that there's, I think, two layers of where our money complexity comes from. And specifically, I want to look at the lens of inner child. One is, what did you experience as a kid growing up, right? So, like, you shared some of your experiences. My
Mhm.
mom was 19 when I was born. My dad's a commercial fisherman. We
Mhm.
did not grow up with a whole lot of financial flow, and so I have stories about like
Mhm.
what was available, what we could invest in. Like, I'm going to be 40 years old this year, and I teach about this stuff, and I still sometimes get weird about buying fancy. And by fancy, I mean like the third tier of face cream at CVS because my
Mhm.
little kid self was like, my mom once made some comment about how we didn't need that, right?
Yep.
So there's that layer that your conscious mind can probably pretty clearly go back to, and you can sit and ask yourself some questions like, what did people say around money? What were the big
Yeah.
financial experiences that I had in my life? If your parents went bankrupt while you were a kid, that's going to inform your relationship to money. And
Yep.
we can see that, right? You might not have done all the thinking and questioning, but we can see it. There's another layer, and this is the layer that I think that we never really get to, and why I get so fired up about this. And that is where your subconscious is processing things about safety and love that have nothing to do with money. And you are just
Mm.
processing them through money because we use money for literally everything. It's actually the perfect um, it's the perfect thing to receive our projections because
Mhm.
whatever wound needs attention. Is it abandonment? Is it codependence? Is it
Mhm.
is it dysregulated sense of safety? Like, whatever wound needs your attention, money's like, I got it, I'll catch it. There's a kind of generosity to money in that way. It's like, what do you need help with? I'll be the bad guy, right?
Mhm.
And we bang our heads against the wall because we stay on the surface linear mind level, and we don't actually create space or even have fucking conversations about the fact that maybe money is complicated because you've healed codependency in all these other areas of your life, and it still is living inside of you, and now it's running your money story. So you might not have codependent friendships anymore for the most part, but you've still
Mhm.
got it running on the operating system. And so
Mhm.
you have stories like, I'm self-employed. I deal with a lot of people who are self-employed. So you deal with like, well, I can't charge that much. What do people want me to
Yep.
charge? Right?
Yep.
People will get mad if I raise my rates. Right?
Mhm. You know, This happens every once in a while where someone starts talking and I'm like, we're having this amazing conversation. Listeners are going to be so excited and like we're going to really give them that space. And then I go, fuck me, I wasn't ready for this. And I'm having some insight that's happening right now. And I knew certain things. Like I definitely have the same rates piece. Like my husband keeps going, you haven't hit a ceiling yet. Like when you go in and you speak at companies, when you do these things, like sure, you have people that maybe individually don't necessarily buy your program. Like they're priced out, they know that. Or maybe like coaching, they have to kind of budget for that. But when you go in and you do these corporate events, like you have yet to be told no. I want you to price yourself so high that someone has to say no so you can figure out your
Mm.
ceiling. And I get so uncomfortable. I knew that one. But as you're describing this and you're going, oh, like, these layers of codependence and maybe you thought you've healed them and you've done this. And I went, that's why I think I'm still two things that I'm struggling with right now. One, I have this beautiful new friendship with an individual, but her family. And she is so generous. And
Mhm.
I'm noticing it goes both ways. Like one of us will host a dinner or one of us like picks up, tickets to ride the train at the zoo or one of us picks up this or does that. But in the back of my brain, I feel like I am racing to tally it to make sure that she doesn't feel like I am taking advantage of something because
Mhm.
my relationships have in the past, and obviously still to some degree, rooted on the fact that people leave unless they need me and money becomes a way that they need me, which, and I'm just going to let my brain go through this last part and
Yeah,
then I'll
yeah,
pause,
bring it, bring it.
is exactly why I've been married to my husband now almost 8 years, 7.5 years. We've been together for almost 15 years. In the beginning of our relationship, I made the bulk of our money. He was finishing up undergrad. He went to medical school. He started residency. Like I was the one making the money. And I never felt resentful of that. I
Mhm.
never felt anything. Like he had to leave a job that was making a good amount of money on the side when he started medical school and was like, I really want to take this research position. I think it'll be better for me. I'm like, fuck yeah, hands down. If you need to volunteer, like I got you. We have been flipped since he became an attending. I am years deep into this. And as we sit and we just had a retreat this past weekend and we were talking about our shame and all these pieces, I still have, like, I think that's the root of it is I know he loves me, but my biggest fear is because I don't make enough money that doesn't translate to enough worth that the love could be sustainable. And I can like feel myself like my conscious mind knows he's not going
Yeah.
anywhere. And I've like got to the point where it's like I've unwrapped a lot of layers of codependence in our relationship, but I can see as you're saying this, like, wow, like that I'm so afraid that this is like the big flag that if I don't keep calling it out to either get his confirmation it's okay. Like I'm looking for him to give me validation
Yeah.
we're okay and for him to know that I know that I'm not doing enough. So then I go and I'm like, but I do this and this and this and here's all these things that I do. I'm really only perpetuating my shame and my scarcity and my fear that like he couldn't possibly choose me if I wasn't the one that he owed something to or that he was being taken care
Just
of by.
because. It couldn't be just
Yeah.
because you
Yep.
inherently it's because of how you provide and what you do. It couldn't be your being, it's your doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Mm. Which, I mean, if we were expanding it, that's, I think a lot of people are, whether it's in your partnership, if it's in friendships with our parents or caregivers, in our businesses. Like my business couldn't, like, no one would choose me unless it was I made it so easy for them to choose me because why would they pick me over someone else? Oh,
And where this gets complicated,
more than
uh
this?
we have, like, scratched the surface, my friend.
Okay, I'm hot. I'm ready.
No,
Let's
I
go.
know, I
Let's
know.
go.
So, as you start to heal your codependence, right, which everyone who's listening to the
Mhm.
show obviously is, like, knees deep in that journey,
Yep.
you reach this point where some part of you who used to be repressed has come fully online or come a lot online, and she's like, "We don't self-abandon? No fucking
Hmm.
way, we've come too far." And at the same time, we still have our fawn people pleasing thing. And so when we're
Hmm.
in the phase where they haven't integrated, and they're like in tension with each other. And they're kind of like, I'm doing a little shoulder dance, everybody who's listening, of back and forth.
Mhm.
We can create a huge, and if money is the place where we are processing this, we can create a financial drought that will confuse the crap out of us, because we will think, okay, again, I'm going to use self-employment as an example because it's the handiest, but
Yeah.
I see it all the time. People are self-employed, they take the leap, it's going well, they're making lots of money, they're like, woohoo, look at me go, I'm going to keep healing my money wounds, and all of a sudden the money dries up or contracts, and they're like, I don't get it, what wounds haven't I uncovered? It creates this whole kind of like thing that people continue to think it must be my fault, and as if we've reverted, right? People talk about like, I've reverted, I've backslid, et cetera, et cetera. And what's actually happening is you're too far in to your codependence healing to self-abandon, but another part of you only knows how to engage, in this case we're talking about money, from that place of self-abandonment. So you're just frozen in a kind of tug of war.
Mhm.
And it can get really confusing. And so what ends up having to happen is that we have to make peace between the fawn and the like, no, I don't self-abandon anymore. And to your point about
Yes.
your husband, like, and I've been in the same exact journey with my husband, same exact thing, where I also was the primary breadwinner. I also have the story that's like, what am I contributing? And again, I
Right.
share this really transparently because this is alive in my life, even as this is what I teach. And I am so passionate about that because I do want to normalize that it's okay that we keep learning, and the learning doesn't have to be
Mhm.
painful. It can be very beautiful, because what I find as I keep doing this learning is that I just get to fall more and more in love with my husband all the time.
Mhm.
Because every time I uncover a new place where I'm still playing the same old game, as I get to release it, I get to receive more of how much, of course, he loves me. I'm
Mhm.
great. Right?
Mhm. What you just said that's interesting and is bringing up another layer to me, which is I think I struggled then. So he and I were talking about this. We were actually sitting down on Christmas Eve and talking about roles and responsibilities and like both of our lives, personally and professionally, how they come together, how we feel like we're doing. And we talked a lot about choice and agency. And I think sometimes there's this idea that money, and I think that goes back to that piece that you said of both safety, but also the freedom component and what it can give us. And so we talked a lot about the pressures and the choices that we're making in our lives. And one of the things that I also think comes in for people, particularly if you're in a marginalized or often oppressed identity, is then the pressure of that piece as well. So then, okay, I can start to reconcile this within the silo of my relationship with my husband. We are making this conscious choice by nature. Like, sure, I could, if I wanted to go take a full-time job in a therapy office, have a different income. If I wanted to go full out, like I'm on the road speaking all the time in companies, income would look different. There's sort of a reductiveness to that and the idea of how much money we make versus quality of life. Okay, again, I can tease that apart. I can start to make sense of it. I can make this choice. But the other piece that I'll start to struggle with is, but I'm also a woman and I'm supposed to fight against some of these gender norms and some of these ideas. And I'll get stuck feeling like there's something like an allegiance to a movement that also gets in the way. And I think not everybody here is necessarily going to identify with that. But a big thing that I think for me comes up, and for a lot of people, whether it's gender identity, race, socioeconomic status, it's that idea of then I'm supposed to do to help change the story. And that's really hard.
I love that you're speaking to this, and I kind of want to share a story of my own experience, and I want to ask you a little bit more about this cultural feeling of who am I to revert to cultural norms, and also in there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing a little bit of also who am I to want more than what I already have, right? I already have so much more
Mm-hmm.
than where I came from, and so who am I to push beyond this, right?
Yep.
And I think that this piece is also really sneaky to the point about belonging and the way in which money is woven around belonging. And it's making me think of a couple of experiences I've had in connecting to my ancestors. So I'm a thoroughly Irish American girly. My daughter's born on St. Patrick's Day. My ancestors were not joking around, right? I laugh because I even did one of those 23andMe things a long
Uh-huh.
time ago, and I don't even actually know my biological father. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to get some cool results. And it was like literally like, no, girl, you are Irish American. Even in the mystery is you're Irish American. So anyways, in multiple times in meditations, I have felt in my body my own ancestral epigenetic energy of the not enoughness. And I have watched a kind of longing to belong that I was processing as a need to stay where I was, as if I love my ancestors. They left their homeland starving and came on a boat. And so who am I to ask for all this ease? And I've watched my own body kind of recoil that you will be left alone because you will be cast out of this ancestral legacy.
Yeah.
And every time I've tapped into this in different iterations of it, I get this really beautiful, like my ancestors just like pour in around me. I mean, they were salty and sassy because that's who they are, but they like pour in around me and they're like, no, 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 baby girl. It is the opposite. Your joy is our legacy. Your ease ripples back through time, right? And I think to like zoom way out, when I think about like systemic systems of cruelty like racism and capitalism and sexism, we can't actually change things without fucking changing things. And that includes our internal state and also the big systemic weights that are killing the earth, that are hurting so many of us. We understand that capitalism is toxic. We understand that, I mean, listeners to your show understand that racism and patriarchy and the horrible atrocities that are happening in the world like are not sustainable and are not okay. And we use money to fund all of that. And also money could be whatever we want it to be. And I don't mean that in some Pollyanna kind of way. And I don't mean that in some like girl boss your way to the top and then you can sit at the table with the men and be another perpetrator of violence. I mean that as in we could imagine something different. And I have watched in my own life and in my clients' lives how as we unravel these really painful wounds that we are just trying, they deserve to be healed. And so they are asking for attention and they are thrusting themselves onto money to be processed. And as we heal them, my experience of money in my life has changed, not always as a financial amount, although sometimes, but as an energy. For so many years, money felt like this terrible, scary, angry father figure who hated me, right? And wanted to punish me. The like patriarchal God, right? Was basically how I perceived money. It was like waiting to reveal my sins to the world and cast me out of love. And then one day, and then eventually money started to feel like a teacher. Like, okay, you got something to show me. I got lessons to learn. And then one day I declared like, what if money felt like a friend? You know, that's what I'm ready for. What if money felt like a friend? I then did immediately have a very terrible breakup with one of my oldest friends. So be careful of the spells that you cast. But what happened even in that is all what happened in that moment. I mean, like literally within 24 hours of speaking that prayer aloud, the universe does not play with me. But it was this really, it brought all of these wounds to the surface of like, here's where you believe you are unworthy of love. Here's where you have been putting yourself into a turtle shell and retracting away and like reinvesting in your own stories of badness and unworthiness. And what if you didn't carry that debt anymore? And I see that friend, I see that breakup as a really beautiful gift that I received, even though it was really painful, about how I could actually love myself more. Right. And at the end of the day, I think so much of our money pain, where it's emotionally painful, a lot of it comes down to the parts of us that just want to belong and just want to feel safe. And we deserve that. And I fully believe that as more and more and more of us do this kind of deep healing, where we let money turn into something that feels loving and safe, what we're really doing is we're allowing life to feel safe. We're allowing ourselves to feel safe. We're allowing ourselves to feel worthy. It's the same deep healing that you've done around all sorts of other spaces, but you
Mhm.
just probably haven't allowed yourself to do it around money because we make it this other area. And I
Mhm.
fully, with every bone in my body, believe that the more people do that, the more the energy of money itself starts to shift and change, and the way we engage in it, and the way that we use it, and the way it is used, and new things start to become possible. Um, I like to say, like, the
Mm.
revolution is an inside game.
I like a couple of things that you're saying that, especially as we think about kind of bringing it to a close for listeners, is, we went from this very specific personal relationship around money, and then we expanded it into this sort of global context. And I feel like two things are coming up. One, recognizing how in our healing relationship with money, with ourselves, all of these pieces, sometimes I think our anxiety will grab for things like, well, now, but what about this gender component? What about this? What about this? And we often then sort of use these systems to keep ourselves and others imprisoned in the
Yeah.
systems because we've been taught that. And it's then that it goes back to that either or. I'm either a feminist and I have to make the most money and not need a man, or I'm reverting back into this thing instead of realizing that money, like you said, can be whatever I want it to be, but that requires a certain sense of internal peace and healing to allow myself to be free within that. And so I think you hit on this bigger piece. And then within that, you also talked about your fear of being lonely, along with some actual loneliness that came. And what's interesting is the fear that you had didn't come to fruition, but some other loneliness did. And I think that sometimes we have to then recognize the difference between belonging and performing. And that
Mhm.
relationship that you had was a part of a performance rooted in shame. And it doesn't mean that friendship didn't serve you. We're not making that friend or you the villain. We're saying that relationship was birthed out of your shame stories. And that's what fueled it and allowed it to be fed to continue on. And when you chose the other path, that allowed you to then create different stories and relationships. And so that is a part of the process that I think many of us have to deal with is learning that there are some relationships that will change when we do our money healing. And that can be professional, that can be personal, that can be purely our internal relationship. And so, gosh, with all of these big pieces, I'm thinking about for listeners, they're going, okay, you've convinced me. It is more than layer one. When you talked about complexity, it's more just like, what did I grow up learning about money? Like, fuck, there's a bigger, deeper piece to this. And how am I subconsciously processing or not processing my pain, my shame, my fear through my relationship with money and through the sort of external systems of fear and shame that are using money to leverage that too? And so, two parts. One, if people were to walk away and you were to gift them with an invitation for a next step, whether that's a
Mhm.
reflection question, an action step, what would you give them? And then
Mhm.
two, for the people that are like, okay, I've done that or I'm in that. And Kyley, I want to walk with you in this because I know myself well enough to know that I can't or I don't want to or I don't have to do it alone and I want you to be by my side. How do they reach out to you?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the number one thing is love what comes up. So everyone listening to the show, I can just trust based on the kind of community you're going to have around you. You are people who have already done a lot of relationship and relational healing. And I would invite you to bring that same energy towards money. So, for example, most of us are taught this story that we have to be perfect and good enough for money. And if we do everything right, then we can have what we want. You wouldn't allow yourself to be in a relationship with a romantic partner where those were the terms and conditions. So, so give yourself space to imagine a different kind of relationship. And if you think about any big relationships where you've done some healing around, you probably had to have some come to Jesus moments, right?
Mhm.
You probably had to have some tough conversations, right? Where you say, you know what, money? I am pissed. I am so mad. You have not been here for me. And I am scared and I am angry and it hurts. Because most of us are, to the point of the codependent programming, are still thinking I have to go off in the corner and heal my anger and not be angry. And then when I'm happy and grateful, I can go to money and then money will deem me good enough. Right. And so I would invite you to love whatever is and let it all come up and out. In the same way you know how to do it in all these other spaces, bring those tools here. You are perhaps more resourced than you are giving yourself credit for, perhaps because you didn't have the most useful paradigm before. And start to imagine what you want that healthy, freeing, generous, loving relationship to feel like. Ultimately, what if money felt like unconditional love for you in your life? What would that look like? It probably wouldn't ask you to be perfect. And if people want more, I would say the first place to start is I have a 2-day workshop that I did called Money Magic. I've done it a whole bunch of times. It's a really beautiful 2-day workshop. It's free. Each one is 90 minutes. There's beautiful reflections, some guided meditation journeys in there, as well as some more frameworks and questions. And I would just invite people to go check that out. If you are super fired up and you're like, don't give me the free thing, like I want all in, honestly, just you can find me on Instagram. I'm Kyley Caldwell at Instagram, TikTok. Long may it live. Who knows? I'm at the Kyley Caldwell, and you can shoot me a DM there, and we could set up a consult call and chat about where you're at and what of the variety of ADHD fueled resources I have, meaning I have many things that I'm always cooking.
I love that. And I love that you're so generous with your willingness to share information, insight, and reflection. And I think there's two parts to that. One, I think your inner work around developing a sense of knowing and a confidence in yourself. And like we talked about in the beginning with this introduction, you getting so clear on what you can offer the world and starting to really hold that and honor it. And so then you're not having to safeguard every piece of information to be like, well, yeah, but then this is this and this is this. Because when we're in that state of scarcity and lacking in self-confidence and self-efficacy, that's how I see the money story playing out, is sort of the ticky-tackiness. And so to recognize this confidence in what you can offer. And I think for people hearing that, it really reinforces your values and what you're capable of bringing to the table. And so listeners, I really encourage you. I mean, I didn't know about it, so I'm going to go do this 2-day money workshop. I'm going to see if my partner wants to do it with me. I think Jordan and I will have a lot of beautiful conversation around it, and just thinking about in anything in life, I feel like if you get to the place you're like, I've done it all, I know all the things, you're probably putting up a barrier. And so how do we instead go, how do I keep learning? How do I keep exploring? How do I find ways where I don't have an answer? And I think that curiosity is really where we can keep doing that deeper work. And that doesn't mean we don't take days off and we don't have peace and we don't say, today I'm good with exactly where I'm at in this imperfect walk of life and the ups and the downs. But I think being open to that. And so Kyley, this has been amazing. I am so grateful for the time that we got to share together today. I'm so excited for the next step for me and my own work and what I can bring into my therapy sessions and kind of processing for myself, as well as the ways that I think our listeners are really going to be invited to see money from a very different vantage point than they have before.
Can I say add something else to what you just shared? I mean, thank you very much for seeing
Please.
me. I really appreciate that. And I want to say specifically, I do feel at this point really clear in what I have to offer, right? Like, if you notice, I'm not offering these resources to say, and I will make you a millionaire. I
Yep.
might. I have clients who are millionaires. I have clients who are not and have no desire to be that. I have had, at one
Yep.
point, my favorite, like, that's not what I'm offering. What I'm offering is that I believe we all deserve to feel safe in a relationship with money. And when we feel safe with our relationship to money, then doors open and we get to make sovereign choices. And that's what I want for us, because then you can determine your own future. But I'm clear on that, and I stand with a lot of confidence, and I appreciate so much you seeing that, in part because money has lovingly dragged my ass to this place. Like, I did not want to be a money coach, to be perfectly clear. Like,
Yeah.
I thought I was just going to go be like a woo-woo witchy healer and not talk about any of that stuff anymore, right? And people kept coming to me and saying like, no, I want this. And I was just like, finally, I was like, oh, fine, universe, fine. But we are taught to experience scarcity and financial constriction as a sign that we have done something wrong. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest pivots that really changed things for me was instead to see, what if this was money loving me and teaching me, which does not mean I like it. It does not mean this is cool. But what if there was something else happening here that wasn't a measure and marker of my personal failures? And what if I could see that each time I bump up against scarcity or a client who says yes and then backs out, or whatever the case may be, that those were actually opportunities for me to unhook even more from shame and codependence. Those have been always been my two biggest. That's why I can stand here now feeling
Mm-hmm.
so excited to give a ton of free stuff away. That's why I can stand here now knowing precisely what I have to offer. It's because I got beat up, but the beating up was for me. And again, that is not to say, like, therefore be grateful for things being hard. I will never say that. I will say, cry your eyes out and let God hear you. Insert your own word there, because you deserve to be heard. So thank you for seeing me. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited for everybody who gets to engage with and like create your new paradigm. That's what I want for us to create your new paradigm for what money can be,
Mm-hmm.
um, because that's what you deserve.
I love that. And I think that is sort of that mic drop moment for people where so much of shame resilience is allowing ourselves to break out of this idea that everything is negative or will be bad or scarcity based, and instead allowing that perspective shift, allowing the both and, which I mean,
Yeah.
who knew we were going to start this conversation with the most beautiful wrap up point, which is how do you allow the both and? The rejection can hurt, the pain is terrible. And what am I learning? What can I experience? How can I take something from this that allows me to both validate how hard things have been or the pain I've gone through and continue to grow and to not lose myself in it or succumb to the shame that's just waiting to try to protect me from all the things it thinks it's going to happen when I become my highest, most free self. And so, oh, listeners, I really hope that you come back to this episode multiple times and you just see what comes up. I feel like even what came up for me today probably would have been something totally different 6 months ago. And it really is a testament to that cyclical piece that Kyley mentioned, but also this notion of how our healing journey looks over time and sort of the layers that we will allow ourselves to go to or are able to tap into. And so, bookmark it, come back, continue to deepen the learning. Be sure to let us know in the comments what came out of this episode. If you take that 2-day money magic workshop, let us know what came up there. Or if there are more questions, things that you want to hear from Kyley about on the show, or you want her to talk about more on her social media or to connect with you one-on-one, definitely use the comment section for that. Otherwise, I will make sure that all of the information to reach out to her is in the show notes. So you'll have that available as well. Remember, this work is not meant to be a one and done. Take your time, be in the process. Everything about this is resilience focused, which means context, layers, ebbs, and flows. And so allow this to be what it is for you today. Take with it what you can. Come back to it when you're ready for the next step. And as always, we will see you back here next Sunday.